Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Undisrupted Podcast. And lately in educational circles, we've heard a lot of this phrase called learning loss. It's been identified as something that if you want to receive funds, you need to identify how you're going to overcome it. I really struggle with that phrase, learning loss. I feel like there's other things we could call it. Adam, what are your thoughts on that phrase, learning loss? What do you think?
You really want to know what I think about this?
I really want to know what you think about it.
Learning loss is one of those things. Ultimately, I put that in the same category as broken home, because learning is still happening. It's just not the learning that we have traditionally called K-12 schooling learning, because our kids are learning a whole different set of skills. Our teachers are learning a whole different set of skills. Does it follow that prescribed curriculum map that we've had in the past? Heck no, but it's a different type of learning that our students are happening. So to call it learning loss is really saying that the learning that has happened over the past, I don't know, what are we like 13, 14 months into this thing, we just poo-pooing that, which is, beyond me. But no, not learning loss. It's a different kind of learning that we've had happen.
Okay, so I hear different. Well, I'm going to pull in our guest here. This is Kerry Gallagher. She's the assistant principal for teaching and learning at St. John's Prep. We've known Kerry for quite a long time. She's also the education director at Connect Safely. You can follow her on Twitter at KerryHawk02. Kerry, thoughts on that learning loss? What you got?
Okay, so I have two things here. Number one, your kindergartner, your third grader, or my third grader, or your third grader, Carl, or you have school age too, right, Adam?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, like by the time they're 25, like this isn't gonna matter. They're all just gonna be 25-year-old adults together entering the workforce, right? So let's not worry too much about how quote unquote behind they are because of this, right? They're still gonna be readers by then. They're still gonna be, have the skills that they need to enter the workforce, assuming that our school systems adjust according to what the workforce is going to need moving forward, right?
That's a big
assumption.
That's a big one. Go. Yes. Okay.
So
I'm following
number two. So number two, so parents of young children, like, take a deep breath, calm down. It's all good. I do see the concerns though, from the perspective of our juniors and seniors, right? Or even like sophomores and freshmen, because they are going to have to take like AP tests. That they may want to get college credit for. And there is a significant amount of time lost in taking those AP courses that are very prescriptive, that are taught to the test. So yes, big picture life skills learning loss. No, I'm not worried. I do think we are retooling with different skills that are not going to go away in terms of their value, but in a system that hasn't necessarily pivoted very quickly to this change in how we're learning, where they have to take these AP tests and they have to take the SATs, and there are courses that they take that are timed out, that are taught to the test. There is some concern for those guys and girls that I get where they're coming from in terms of those anxieties.
Yeah, I think it needs to. I was gonna say, I think the phrase itself is extremely negative. Obviously, learning loss. It sounds like you'll never get it back. It's gone forever. And then I put this out on Twitter a couple of days ago because I was like, there's got to be something else out there. And then people threw a slew of things at me. One of them was like recovery. It's called learning recovery. And I was like, okay, well, recovery also, to me, recovery sounds like, I got to go to recovery for something. I mean, if adults have to go somewhere to recover, you know what that means. So in my head,
go to rehab.
No. So maybe it's learning rehab. No. And so I found the word that I like, which is realignment, which I think is what it needs to be, because I think when you look at the definition of realignment, I pulled it up here. It's the act or instance of restoring or changing to a previous or different position, because I actually don't think, like you guys kind of hit on it, we're not going to go back to what it was. I think we're gonna go back to some new condition or a different type of learning, and we're not necessarily losing anything. We just have to kind of rebalance the tires, so to speak. So I'm gonna stick with that as my phrase, but I think it's kind of ties into what both of you were saying. Adam, what were you gonna jump on there with?
Yeah, I was gonna say I have my own thoughts about AP. That may have to be another podcast for another day.
Agreed. A whole other podcast.
On this whole AP notion. But I definitely agree. Because my kids are kindergarten and fourth grade. So, my big concern with the kindergartner going in, I was like, okay, is she going to have the same skill set that I know my one in the fourth grade had, because she had a traditional, kindergarten experience or whatever. But it goes back to understanding that my wife and I are in a position to provide that support for her. And so it's not just my kid that we have to think about with this learning recovery or whatever the case may be. It's also those kids who don't have that support system, if you will, at home to give them those experiences. But that's something that we've always had with those students coming into our buildings initially, with that gap in background knowledge, gap in vocabulary, all those things that we know some of these students come into. So that's still the same issue. So this pandemic did not make it just put a magnifying glass on it so everybody can kind of see it, but it's always been there. Because these are the same households that probably are suffering from the connectivity and things of that nature, or some of the time on the devices. So with all that being said, I know you've done a lot of stuff in the past as it relates to internet safety and things like that with students. So how do you think this pandemic, because we try to do the time in the app for a certain amount of time, and then it got to the point where we're like, oh, the hell with it, take up all
limited time, just leave me alone.
Just go for it. So a couple of points. How do you think this internet safety has impacted remote learning, and also if you want to talk about time students have had on the devices just in general, good, bad, and different?
Yeah. So there is some research out on this, on how much time has changed. So in March 2020 alone, which was, lockdown month, our screen time nationally went up 60% just in that month. And then it didn't settle back down. Like, it wasn't like a pendulum swung and then swung back. We've pretty much maintained at that much screen time since then. And I think maybe it leveled off a little bit over the summer because everybody was in warmer weather, at least in the United States. But then once we hit, at least for us, today is going to be a treat here in New England because we're going to, be in the 60s all day. So yay, right? Because we still have a hard freeze every night here. So,
wow.
So I started with frost in my car this morning. So I think and I think that will happen naturally. But the point is that we can't be focused on the time. And that's what those of us who work in this space have in the digital wellness space, which, by the way, is a term that I'm no longer using digital citizenship at all. I use digital wellness.
I like that.
Have been talking about for years and years. Like, let's not focus on the time, and any of those parent monitoring apps that really just shut down access after a certain number of minutes, that's not helping them learn. Instead, it's making them hyper focused on doing things faster in a shorter amount of time, which is actually more cognitively damaging than giving them the time to do the tasks that are actually valuable with their technology. And how do we determine what's valuable and what's not with our technology? Well, a well-designed interactive video class experience, remote class, is high quality, but it is possible for an online video chat to be a low quality experience as well, if it's not well designed by the teacher or interactive for the child. So I think it's much more nuanced and complicated in a time when all of us are overloaded and busy and parents are looking for easy answers. There isn't one. And that's a tough pill to swallow. But it's important to engage in the conversation. So I don't want to go on and on, but just to touch on this, the way that when I consult with regularly in my role at my school with parents who are struggling with this at home, and serve as an advisor for parents, and then check in every couple of weeks after we've put a plan into place. One of the things I compare it to quite often is the conversations that parents have with their children about nutrition. Every single day, I ask my children at the end of the day, how many vegetables have you had today before we have dinner? And that's just part. Am I a nutritionist? No. Am I a registered dietitian? No. Am I qualified to give them advice on what is healthy eating? Absolutely. So are all parents out there comfortable with technology? Are they all, people who track the research in this space like I do? No. But are they qualified to advise their children on what's healthy interaction with technology? Of course they are, because they're their parents and they should feel empowered to do that.
And on the flip side of that, I guess the nutritional, taking that analogy a little bit further, we sometimes do if you eat your 5 fruits and vegetables, or your 6, 7 fruits and vegetables, you also get dessert at the end of the day. So on the flip side of that with technology, I find myself still doing this, and I know the research. Carrie and I have gone back and forth on this for years. We know what's right and wrong, but sometimes even I still fall prey to okay, you've done a great job, you completed your work, and you just want some downtime to watch Minecraft people on YouTube. I, as an adult, do that. So I'm it's really, how can I, if I'm modeling that and then I say, no, you can't, I mean, that's where I get into a challenge. I also don't want to make it a reward or a carrot, like, oh, you got all your work done, therefore you get 1 hour of blank
Yeah.
time or whatever it is. So I'm learning a little bit just from hearing you talk about, maybe even by doing that, I'm giving them, it is making them a little more hypersensitive or hyper focused on just like that amount of time that they have versus what they're doing. Is there a good or bad with that, with like in terms of the carrot or the dessert aspect of giving them free time on their screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think even with dessert, there's if we're gonna this metaphor is gonna keep going and
Let's
going. It's
go.
gonna be great.
Let's go.
So
Yeah.
so even with dessert, like for instance, we still have piles of Easter candy here at my house, right? When
Oh,
we're recording
gosh.
this. So and we were just finishing up the Valentine's Day candy. So I feel like what's the next holiday? Is we're gonna have Mother's Day candy come next? Like here we go.
Yeah.
But like, yes, do they get to have a little bit of their Easter candy every day? Of course. Is it a reward for eating the good food? Not necessarily. Is it in balance with the good food? Yes. So I'm not super strict about when they have their candy during the day, but they know like what about is like a good balanced amount as compared to what else they have. And, you know, I also know like my children are not afraid to tell me, like, I actually ate the whole chocolate bunny today instead of just eating like the ears and the head. So then we talk about, all right, well,
Good.
what are you going to do? Like, it isn't just about one day. One day, it does not make you a bad or a good eater. One day of like, you know, binge watching a series on Netflix does not make you addicted to or not addicted to screens. It's a balance of how you eat over time.
Right.
So it's a balance of how you use your screens over time. And so I think that's something that parents need to keep in mind when there's opportunities to go outside on like a day that's in the 60s here in New England. Then yeah, use that time, right? Go outside. But on days when it's kind of crappy out, or on days where you're not feeling well, it's okay to binge watch a little bit, and don't worry that has some deeper meaning about your pattern in your child or as a family.
But it's one of those things, I guess, we also have to be careful as adults, and this is as parents or as folks running technology, we get so caught up in do as I say, not as I do as well. So even when you start talking about these Zoom meetings that our kids have been sitting in, I promise you, I have yet to be in a Zoom meeting and not multitasked. Yeah, you know,
I've seen evidence of this, by the way, direct evidence from Adam. I'm not calling you out, but I'm calling you out. No.
In the streets, they call that dry snitching, by the way,
Carl.
But yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, we do it all the time, whether it's checking email, or if you're on your Mac, you have your iMessage, or you may be texting somebody while you're doing that, or shopping online. We're always doing something.
I just changed my virtual background while you were talking too. That's what's funny. Like, totally, I'm making fun of you, but I'm changing my virtual background. What are you talking about multitasking? Yeah. Yes.
But I mean, we kill our kids for, I mean, it's, and you know, research tells us there's no such thing as multitasking anyway. You're either doing something good or doing it bad. But we still have to keep in mind that kids are going to do that. To your point, it's okay to have a day where you just binge, but it's about teaching them where they have ownership to understand, okay, to your point about eating the chocolate. You know, my kid's like, Daddy, I ate all my whole chocolate bunny today. I probably shouldn't have any more candy today. You know what? You made it a good choice. That's a good decision. Because what's going to happen? Oh, my tummy's going to hurt. So like, you know, I can't watch Minecraft videos or Roblox videos all day because that's not good.
Yeah. I think I would like to go back to your point about multitasking, because what the research is showing is that you're right, multitasking is not a thing. It doesn't exist. Your brain can't really do two things at once. It can do unconscious things and conscious things at the same time. So in that sense, we can multitask, but we can't do two conscious things at once. That's why you can drive and listen to a podcast, right? Because yes, you're driving and paying attention, but your brain has gotten used to that task so much that it takes less concentration than it did when you were 16 and you were just learning, right? Same thing with walking. Like when you first learned to walk, your brain was fully engaged in just trying to figure that out. But now you can walk and have a conversation, or you can walk and, I don't know, look at your phone without actually looking where you're going, but you can navigate your phone and move your feet at the same time, right? So similarly, what the research is showing is that you can't multitask two cognitively engaging processes, but you can task switch, which means you think you're multitasking, you think you're doing two things at once, but what you're actually making your brain do is switch back and forth. And you think you're making these switches very quickly, but it's actually about 6 seconds per switch that you lose. So
Wow.
6 seconds is a long time.
Yep.
And what you actually lose by doing that much switching is you can lose, like, over the course of a workday, if you're task switching a lot, you can lose a whole hour or even 2 of your workday if that's something that you're in the habit of doing all the time. And so I think what you can, there's all kinds of research with studies with like actual tests where they do this. And it shows that people really think they're good at multitasking. And I've given keynote speeches to rooms full of hundreds of people where I'm like, who's a really good multitasker? And then I've been like, no, you're not, right? The whole audience. And the whole audience like then hates me for a second.
Yeah.
They hate me for a second, right? And then I show them the research and I show them the data. And then we kind of talk about the situations and it like slowly sort of turns thing. And I'm not going to convince people in like one keynote speech, but if I can make them think about it a little bit over time, I think that's important. But the key is with your kids, right? And as teachers, the teachers who listen to this, like teachers can capture this to really have them practice. And I did this by opening class every day with a quote, like an inspiring quote on the screen, up on the screen. And I have the kids, we start the year, and this is like middle school age. We start the year with just read the quote and think about nothing but the quote, hands on the desk, feet on the floor for 15 seconds. That's so hard for them.
Yes.
15 seconds. And then we build over the course of the year by 5-second increments until they can do it for a full minute. And it's number one, it's a muscle and a skill that they build, focus and concentration. So as teachers, that's something that we can actually teach them to do and build over time. And there's little things that parents can do at home too to help with that.
All right. Well, I'm going to do a major task switch now. We're going to see if we can do this. I'm going to pivot us. So we're also no. We talk a lot about home things and home usage and how with some best practices around that. Well, in a little bit, we're about to get flush with cash in schools. We're about to get all this ESSER funding. It's coming our way. There's a show I watch on Viceland called Most Expensivest by this guy named 2 Chainz, which is a whole nother thing. By the way, he does go to a most expensive dessert because we were talking about dessert earlier, and he has like golden ice cream or something. So I was just thinking about his show because what he does, he seeks out the most expensivest things and then buys them. And I'm like, are we about to experience that in schools? Because we're going to be flush with money that we didn't have before. So my question for you is this, because we're getting all these funds. What do you think we should spend? What's the best use for schools to spend the funds they're about to get? I know some of it is earmarked for that quote unquote learning loss that we talked about, but really it's fairly open. A lot of this money that's coming, I think it's $200 billion over the 3 different bills that we've gotten. So any thoughts? What's the best use of that money? You're gifted $1 billion for your organization, let's say, or $1 million even. What would you spend it on?
Infrastructure, because we're going to continue to grow our need for infrastructure, and that's not going to change no matter which direction education goes in as a result of what we've learned over the last 12 months. And that means, of course, it means bandwidth. Of course, it means security. But it also means the people who maintain that. So you need to hire people who are going to be able and capable to maintain the increased infrastructure. I think one of the biggest mistakes that school districts make is increasing their bandwidth and increasing their infrastructure without increasing the staffing to manage and monitor that. I think that's super important from an IT perspective anyway. In schools, don't you wish we could buy time? Like, I wish you could buy more minutes for teachers. Teachers need more time to prepare, to correct, to collaborate. I wish there was a way to spend the money on that.
I just bought an NFT that's a little GIF of a clock that's spinning. I used my Ethereum to buy it, and I was like, look, I literally bought time. It's $320, but whatever. It's in Ethereum, so I don't even think that's real money.
Yeah. So that's my possible purchase, and then my impossible purchase answer.
I like it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because especially, you're talking about that. Now, here's something that we kind of were talking about in the pre-show with that. You buy all this stuff, but I think school systems are still a target of bad actors out there. So all this money being spent, infrastructure, more people connected. What are your thoughts on how districts or things they need to start thinking about to keep their data protected, their student safety, all those things?
Yeah, so great question. I mean, certainly there are systems that you can put in place, and those are very purchasable, very findable. You know, and IT folks who are listening to this know what they are and know where to find them. So I think, yes, purchase those. But additionally, I think there needs to be some protocols that are created so that when it happens, you already have a protocol ready to go to roll out, who you contact. You know, if one system is hit, which other systems do you shut down to prevent them from being hit? You know, do you reach out to local law enforcement? Do you go federal? Like, under what circumstances? How do you connect with all those folks? Are there people, contractors that you bring in to help with managing the situation? Do you have a communications department in your district? How do you share information with the parents and students, and when? And do you even have drafts of what those emails or communications might look like? How do you share information with your staff and faculty? You know, all of that information, all of those protocols need to be in place. I feel like a lot of districts have purchased the systems, right? But the systems are that's barely scratching the surface about how you respond to something like this that happens. And it happens all the time. And it isn't just malware and hacking and security breaches, it's ransomware, which means that, you know, that recovery time is much longer. So from an IT perspective, that's my advice. From a personnel perspective, I think we need to really prioritize student data privacy training for our teachers. They need to know what they do on the ground floor. They're the ones with the most contact time with the technology and the children. What it is that they're doing is how that's having an impact on the data privacy practices of the school. And when you do this, the side effect benefit of this is that you actually teach your teachers how to take care of their own data, which is a life skill that will, you know, once it's sort of like you raise up some of us, you raise up all of us. If our teachers start learning about this and how it affects their students, they'll learn how it affects them, and the entire community will become safer as a result.
So that 1 hour that I do with them, that 1 hour of bloodborne pathogen required internet safety, that's enough, right? That's really all I need to do at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, just check the box and you're good. I mean, yeah. No, I mean, like anything else.
That's what people think,
just
though. Yeah.
Just like we spiral learning for our students, and like my children learn about fractions in first grade, and then they learn about percentages in third grade. And even though they're really the same thing, right? We need to spiral the learning for our teachers.
Phishing and malware, and yeah, that Amazon link that your principal may have sent you may not have been from your principal. Yes.
I was just gonna run around when that happens, like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Was it Reese Witherspoon who said, "What are we gonna do now?" Yes. Yeah. All right, Adam, you want to wrap it up with that last question there? And he muted himself right before he was going to do it too. Appropriate.
See, I was being precautious because my nephew is here too with my kids, and so I heard him coming downstairs. I was like, okay, let me just mute.
That's right. Carrie's daughter is Zoom bombing back there, so I'm gonna. It's the real world. It's what the world we're in right now. That's the truth. Yeah.
She's got a lacrosse stick over her shoulder, like marching back and forth as we're talking. I know.
All right, so there's a lot of things that we've had the opportunity to learn during this pandemic, whether we wanted to learn them or not. But, you know, as you look at all these things that we've had, what is something that you think that you can take from a lesson learned from this school year that you can move into the next school year to keep you and your family, your students, everyone undisrupted?
Ooh, good one. Good question. I think what I've learned is that my own children and the children that I serve as an educator are much more capable than any of us adults gave them credit for. My children can manage a whole day of remote schooling by themselves at home. I mean, can they manage a whole week? No, but when I'm in a pinch, can they manage a day? Yeah. They can even feed themselves healthy food. They can even take care of the dog at the same time. They can do it. They can get themselves to and from school on time. My students, if I'm having technical difficulties, or a teacher in my school is having technical difficulties during a class, can they pick up the class and keep it going without me for a minute? Yep. Can they even help me troubleshoot it and make helpful suggestions? Yeah, they definitely can. So I think one thing I've learned is that this is certainly a phrase that's been heard before, but the kids are all right.
Yeah.
And they're actually doing great, and we can learn from them. And that is not a new lesson, but that is something that to me has been much more front and center lately as a result of this.
100% agree with that. I think as we gave them more, as we set those bars a little bit higher and those expectations a little bit higher, they've been rising to them in surprising ways. So I thank you, Kerry, for joining us. This is Kerry at Kerry Hawk 02 on Twitter. Kerry and Adam and I, we go back a long ways. We met each other at several different events and conferences and have stayed connected over the years. Always love to have you and glad to have you on the show finally for season 3 as we kick this off of Undisrupted. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, congrats on this great show, you guys. Great to see you and talk with you today.
Yeah, oddly enough, they keep bringing us back. I don't know what we got to do to get off the air, but apparently we're doing enough to keep us around.
Right on the edge every year, right on the edge. We're going to see. Well, thank all of you for joining us. And for the listeners out there, be sure to subscribe and give us a review. We'd appreciate it. We might even get you a shout out in a future show. This has been the Undisrupted Podcast brought to you by Future Ready Schools. He's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, we are better together.
And we are better
undisrupted.
This podcast is made possible by the generous support of Amazon Web Services.